This is part 8 of my series on my N-gauge model railway project. Previous parts provided an intro to the project and my background with the railways, and covered initial setup of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, various scenic items from Metcalfe, Kestrel, Ratio and PD Marsh kits and built from foam, etc., and a review of my period LMS and LNER rolling stock. This part deals with installing and weathering a Kato motorized turntable. I became aware of the existence of the Kato turntable through YouTube videos. I saw Kato's own presentation of the product and other videos, including a review by Mike Pfeiffer and an installation video by Neil Oldie. I thought that this looked a promising possible addition to my layout, which was already using Kato unit track. I had not been able to figure out how to fit a reversing loop into my layout, and a turntable would allow me to reverse locos and also provide a way to have sheds and parking for multiple locos on the layout. I was a little concerned as to whether it would be possible to fit the Kato turntable into my layout given the limited space on my 8-foot by 4-foot board. If the turntable was going to be added, it really had to fit into the existing yard area. The way others had mostly fitted the table and the default way it came configured with sheds opposite to the main access track just wouldn't work really in the limited space I had available. The whole installation would have just been too long. I downloaded the Kato manual and checked around for other videos and pictures in order to verify that it was possible to install the turntable with sheds or parking tracks on the same side as the main access track and nothing on the far side. I verified that this configuration was possible. Then I cut templates from cardboard based on the dimensions given in the Kato manual, a circle for the table itself, and wedges, each to represent a set of 3 access tracks. Here you can see the templates being tried in my existing yard area, just to verify how the turntable might fit in. And here's a view of the yard area as it was. As you could see from the previous image with the templates, my idea was to put the turntable at the end of the right-hand siding, with parking tracks and or sheds coming back from the table on the same side as the main access track. I also consulted the Kato manual rewiring and control to make sure that it looked as though it should work. It seemed that the project was possible, so I went ahead and ordered the turntable. I was able to find one in stock at a Canadian hobby shop, albeit one on the other side of the continent, thousands of miles away from me, Central Hobbies in Vancouver. I ordered the turntable itself, and I also ordered one extra curved turntable extension track set to allow for the addition of extra tracks coming off the table and immediately turning in to go to a parallel shed rather than a roundhouse. The turntable was an expensive item, costing more than 2 complete starter track sets, but I figured it would be a significant addition to the interest and operation potential of the layout. The order took a couple of weeks to come, and here is the turntable initially placed on the layout for a basic function test. The table comes with 2 attachment units, each of which can attach up to 3 tracks, 4 straight access tracks and 3 little buffer tracks which require some assembly. The additional curved access set that I bought provided 2 more 3-track attachment units, 3 more buffer tracks, and just the 2 curved access tracks, which surprised me. I expected it to come with 3 access tracks, since it comes with an attachment unit for 3 access tracks, 2 curved and 1 straight. But no, apparently they expect you to use a straight access track you already have, so you get 2 access units, but you only get the 2 tracks with the curved extension unit. Also included with the table itself are the table's own controller and a 35-inch ribbon cable to connect the table via the ribbon cable piece that is permanently attached to the table, and a mains power adapter for the table controller, and a jumper cable to allow a train power controller to be connected to the table controller. You must connect a train controller to the table controller for things to work. You can have a dedicated train controller just for the table, but I jumped mine to the existing train controller for my inner zone via a Kato 3-way extension, which I already had, since the controller was feeding the inner zone at 2 power points. So I just essentially added the turntable on as a third power point from that table, but not with the cable going directly to the table itself. The cable goes to the table controller, to the connector on for the jumper cable on the table controller. I had thought that for initial testing I would just lay the turntable down without putting any wires permanently into pace or anything, but given the rather awkward nature of the ribbon cable connection to the controller and the relative shortness of the ribbon cable, that really just wasn't going to work. So I went right ahead and cut a hole through the board for the ribbon cable attachment. You'll be able to see the hole later in this video. Cut is the word rather than drilled, as though I did start by drilling. What is required is a rectangular hole about 1 inch by 1/2 inch or a little more. Here is my control area at the time of this initial function testing. On the right is the controller for the turntable, and you can see the ribbon cable which connects it to the table itself going off the back under the board. Laying at the bottom center is the small power adapter for the table controller, which is of course plugged into the mains via a power bar at left and plugged into the back of the table controller. The third connection is via the jumper cable, which is connected to the more central of the 2 train controllers via a 3-way extension cord, and from there connects to the back of the turntable controller again. It's perhaps worth taking a moment here to explain how control of the table works. It's a little complicated, and I didn't really entirely understand it myself until I actually worked with it. As you can see, the table controller has 2 controls, a 3-way flat switch on the right and a 3-position lever on the left. The lever on the left is for setting the direction of movement of a locomotive when controlling the loco through the turntable, which is necessary whenever the loco is positioned on the turntable or the parking tracks in such a way that the loco is not getting power from anywhere else. Basically, at least the way I set things up, this means any time the loco is on the table or the table's parking tracks, other than for a loco actually on the table and lined up with the main access track. In that case, the loco will get power from the main access track and doesn't need to be powered from the turntable. The lever controls which direction the loco moves relative to the table's main track. Central position is off, no loco power being fed through the table. The other 2 positions move the loco either towards or away from the little control house at one end of the table track. Note that this is entirely relative to the little house, which may be either towards or away from you, depending how you've rotated the turntable. Also note that the direction lever on the turntable control completely overrides the direction setting of the train controller, which is jump connected. To move a loco on the table, the jumped train controller must supply power, so it must be set to either forward or backward and then move to an appropriate power level. But it makes absolutely no difference whether this controller is set to forward or backwards. The direction of the loco, the direction that the loco moves in will be determined by the lever on the turntable control, which completely overrides the direction lever on the original train controller. I would definitely suggest that you leave the lever on the turntable control in the off position at all times, except when you actually want to move a loco requiring power through the table. The other switch on the turntable control is more straightforward. It controls the rotation of the table itself. Pushing the switch to the left starts the table rotating anti-clockwise. Pushing the switch to the right starts the table rotating clockwise. The table makes a slight click as it passes each possible track connection position. You need to wait until it passes the click point for the position before the one you want it to stop at, and then move the switch back to the middle position. The turntable will immediately slow its rotation and gently come to a stop lined up with the next track position. Note that initially I thought that the turntable would line up with the next actually connected track. It's not that intelligent. It just lines up with the next connection position, regardless of whether there is actually anything connected to it or not. Sorry if all that was a bit long-winded, but I thought I should try to go over it for those who might want to know. Here you can see what was sort of my second attempt at setting up the turntable. I've moved a couple of things. It basically worked okay the way I had it originally, but I soon realized something. It doesn't make any sense to have parking tracks with nothing attached to the table on the opposite side to them, since if you do this and you're bringing a loco off the parking track and you don't stop it quite quickly enough, the loco will simply run off the far side of the table, derail and be stuck. So basically, if you're not going to put an actual track opposite each other track, you need to put a bumper track opposite to catch the loco and prevent it derailing. This is why Kato give you 2 3-track attachment units and 3 bumper tracks with the table itself, and 2 more 3-track attachment units and 3 more bumper tracks with the extension set. So you've always got something to put opposite. You never want to have a track with nothing opposite it. So since in my case I'm putting all my actual tracks on the far side of the table, I now have 6 bumper tracks opposite them on the near side. You can also see here how the curved extension set allows you to connect the table to a loco shed with 3 parallel tracks. The shed seen here actually only had a single track door when I got it. I used drills and saws to cut out the front of the shed to allow for 3 tracks entering. Here's another view, still in the second initial testing configuration. You can see 3 locos parked in a modified shed. By the way, that shed is built from a plastic kit, but I didn't build that one myself. All the sheds in the yard area were bought already built and painted from a local seller on Kijiji. While we're looking at this picture, I should mention one other problem that I had with the turntable so you can avoid it should you buy one. The small bridging girder structure in the middle of the table does not come attached to it. It comes separately, and it comes as cast in the middle of a complicated frame of sprues. Like a lot of parts to plastic construction kits. You need to cut it out from the sprues and attach it to the table. But when I cut mine out from the sprues, I cut all of the connection points from the sprues right up against the actual girders, as this seemed reasonable to me from my normal experience with plastic kits. But no, you're not supposed to do that. 4 of the little connections between the girders and the sprues are actually supposed to be pins for connecting the girder to the bridge, and I cut these off. So I couldn't clip my girder bridge onto the table the way Kato intended using those pins, and I had to muck around gluing it on, which actually took a couple of tries, as this plastic does not respond to polystyrene cement. I ended up using CA superglue. In hindsight, the material is perhaps ABS, in which case plastic weld or Tamiya ABS glue should work, but I ended up using cyanoacrylate. But to be clear, you're not really supposed to need to glue anything. It's supposed to just pop together with pins if you don't accidentally cut the pins off. Actually, I must admit I also ended up gluing the bumper tracks. The little black plastic bumpers pop into the bases, and I did pop those in properly at first, but they're extremely flimsy, and I ended up breaking them as I was trying to weather the turntable by resting cardboard on top of them so spray wouldn't get on them, and just resting the cardboard on top of them broke them. So I had to glue them, which I did again with super glue to fix them. Now that I had tested the basic functioning of the turntable and was sure that I had decided exactly where and how I wanted to install it, I took it away again and started working on recessing it into the baseboard, which is what Kato suggests for installation on a permanent layout. And certainly seemed to make sense to me. Here you can see the hole that was initially cut for connection of the ribbon cable, with the white plug on the end of the connection cable peeking through. I've used a pencil to mark around the table and associated access and bumper tracks so I can make a cutout to recess everything into the baseboard. Here's another view, hopefully maybe showing the pencil marking a little more clearly, and again you can see the hole for the connection cable. And here I've started to cut out the top level of foam making up my board. My board's made up of 2 layers of 1/2-inch pink insulating foam glued down on top of an old door, so I simply cut through the top layer of foam. The pale brown stripes are the construction adhesive that was holding the foam together. I just cut through the foam with an X-Acto knife and then pried the piece up with a steel ruler. Since the top layer of foam is made from 2 8-foot by 2-foot pieces, there's a join in the middle of it, and this first piece stops at the join. And now you can see that I've pried out the piece from the other side of the join. You can see the join from the lower layers of the foam which go the other way, as that layer was made from 4 4-foot by 2-foot pieces laid across. The Kato manual for the turntable says to make a recess 3/16 of an inch deep. I didn't want to be trying to carve a shallow recess in the foam section, so I just took out the whole top half-inch layer, and then I used a riser to bring the table back up to the level that I was going to actually have it at. I made a riser by cutting a piece from dollar store foam board. That brought the level of the top of the turntable up to just above the main board level. In hindsight, that's not really what Kato intended, and I should have probably brought the table up a bit higher, but this didn't work too badly. Of course, I needed to cut a hole in the foam board riser to allow the ribbon cable through, because the ribbon cable's got to come up and connect to the turntable. The tweezers were used for pulling the cable up through the hole. And here's the turntable back in position, now recessed into the board. I must admit I didn't quite think through how the connection of the access tracks was going to work. Since the turntable is now, the way I've mounted it, essentially level with the board, the access tracks actually have to come up to connect to the regular Kato track. I guess Kato really intended you to have the table a little bit above the level of the board. So perhaps I should have fitted the turntable a bit higher. I don't know. It seems to basically work okay like this, so I left it like this. Here's a view of the whole layout with the turntable recessed and fitted but not yet weathered. Like this, the turntable does rather stick out and looks very much like a plastic edition, so I felt that weathering was pretty much an immediate necessity. Here's another view looking across the yard area. I'm not unhappy with the recessed fit, but I do want to tone things down by weathering. In hindsight, it would probably have been better to weather the turntable before fitting it, or to have taken it out again for weathering. I didn't, I just weathered it sitting in place on the layout. This certainly allowed for seeing how the weathering was working as I went along, but it was an extremely uncomfortable process trying to lean across to the middle of the board to do fiddly painting, etc. I printed a texture on my computer for the bottom of the pit. Since my printer seems to have decided to make everything green if I print in colour, I guess the red on it isn't working properly or something, I gave up and printed a sort of gravel texture in grayscale. I had to cut it into 2 pieces to fit it into the bottom of the pit, and then I glued it down. All of the curved pieces surrounding the pit of the turntable can be unscrewed and removed, since you can replace any or all of those pieces with access track connectors. I spray painted a couple that I'd already been removed to put the initial access connectors on, with the same paint that I used for the basic painting of the baseboard, and I tried those pieces back on the turntable, as you can see here. I thought they looked okay. So here you can see I've removed all the rest of the surrounding pieces ready for painting. Note the work light I've put onto the board so I can see what I'm doing. I find that I really need strong light to do detail work. Here are the edge pieces from the turntable being spray painted, just put on a piece of cardboard and spray painted. I put the covers for the screws back on so the screw holes wouldn't get painted and the covers would. And here I have put all of the edge pieces back onto the turntable. I've also hand painted all around the access and buffer tracks, and that was no fun, I can tell you. I sprayed a light layer of black onto the red table arm itself and painted the little control house black. It was during the masking for this spraying that I broke the bumper tracks. If I'd realised how fragile they were, I would have removed them while I was doing it. And here's a distant view across, although admittedly you can't actually see the table itself much because of the track. And here's a flash view of the yard after the weathering. The access track surrounds are really a little darker than they should be, but I don't think the effect is too bad. I had trouble finding a grey shade that I could hand paint that would come close to matching. That colour is actually Luftwaffe Grau Violet, which I had left over from aircraft modelling, and that was the closest I had on that I could. I had all sorts of greys because I do ship modelling as well, but that was the one that seemed to come closest to the right colour. And here's a final aerial view. I think I can live with this visually, and I'm happy to have the turntable to help with operations on the layout. As you can see, with the 5 parking tracks I have available, 3 that came with the table and 2 extras from the curved extension set, I've set up 1 3-track shed and 1 single-track shed, and the 5th track is just an open parking track at the moment. If desired, it would be possible to buy another extension set and add one more shed or whatever to the right of the access, where the little building is now. Now, as I said, I'm quite happy to have the turntable to help with operations, but now that the table's been added, that has taken away one of the two sidings that I originally had in the yard, so now there's only a single siding on the whole layout, and that's definitely a bit of a shortcoming. So at this point my thoughts turned to how I might manage to shoehorn some more sidings onto the layout, and the siding addition project that resulted from this will be the topic of the next video in this series.